At 3 o'clock in the morning on November 23, 1998, Bill Weese woke up in hell. Not metaphorically, not in a nightmare. He was standing in a prison cell, in a place of overwhelming heat, surrounded by beings he could not explain. And he was completely, terrifyingly awake. He would be there for 23 minutes. What he came back to tell the world would change his life forever, and it may change the way you think about what happens after we die. Bill Weese was not, by any measure, someone you would expect this to happen to. He was a successful real estate agent living in Southern California with his wife Annette. He was a Christian, had been for years, but he was not someone prone to visions, dramatic spiritual experiences, or the kind of ecstatic states that might explain what he was about to go through. On the night of November 22, 1998, he went to bed at his normal time. There was nothing unusual about the evening, nothing that would have suggested that within hours he would find himself somewhere that defied every category of normal human experience. At approximately 3 a.m., Bill says he was suddenly taken, without warning, without transition, to a place he could only describe as hell. His wife Annette confirmed that she found him on the floor of their living room at 3:23 a.m., screaming, shaking, unable to form coherent sentences. The experience had lasted, by his count and by the clock, approximately 23 minutes. In the years since, Bill Weese has spoken to millions of people across dozens of countries. He has written a book that has sold over 1 million copies. Theologians have examined his account. Neurologists have weighed in. Skeptics have challenged every detail. And yet, Bill Weese has not changed a single word of what he says he experienced that night. Bill describes the first sensation as total displacement. One moment, he was asleep. The next, he was standing. Not in a dreamscape. Not in the fuzzy, half-real quality of sleep. He was fully conscious. More conscious, he says, than he had ever felt in his life. Standing in what appeared to be a stone cell. The walls were rough, volcanic. The air was so hot it was almost impossible to breathe. Not like the heat of a summer day, but a pressure, a weight, as though the heat had mass. He has estimated the temperature at something close to what you would find near an open industrial furnace. There was no light source. And yet, he could see. The cell was approximately 15 by 10 feet. The walls were a dark, ancient stone. There were other beings in the cell with him, and they were not human. He describes them as tall, enormously strong. Their forms were vaguely humanoid, but deeply wrong in a way he struggles to put into words, as though whatever they had once been had been completely consumed by something else. And then they turned their attention to him. What followed, Bill says, was an experience of pure terror, unlike anything he had known, or that he believes is possible to know, in normal human life. The beings attacked him. They were capable of tremendous physical force, but what was worse, far worse, was the weight of what he describes as pure hatred. Not anger, not cruelty. Something older and colder than either of those things. Hatred as a fundamental condition of existence. He felt the heat not just on his skin, but through it, as though every cell in his body was being subjected to it simultaneously. He could not cool down, could not find relief, could not move toward anything that felt like escape. He describes the smell as sulfuric, an overwhelming, pervasive stench that had no equivalent in anything he had encountered on Earth. He heard sounds he cannot fully describe, screaming from somewhere far away. Not one voice, but many, and none of them in pain, in the way we normally understand pain. It was something beyond pain, despair made audible. And underneath everything, the thing he says was the most unbearable element of all, was the certainty that this was permanent, that there was no door, no end, no possibility of it ever changing. Hell, he says, is not a punishment with a term. It is a state of being with no exit. And then it stopped. Bill describes being lifted, not by his own effort. Lifted, rapidly, as though whatever force had brought him there was now reversing. The heat receded. The sound faded. The weight of the place released him. He heard a voice. He identifies it as the voice of Jesus Christ, though he says the identification came not from any sound quality, but from an overwhelming certainty, the kind that bypasses rational thought entirely. The voice did not explain what he had seen. It simply told him he was going back. He woke up on the floor of his living room at 3:23 in the morning. Annette found him there, shaking, soaking in sweat, hyperventilating, screaming words she could not at first understand. It took her several minutes to calm him enough to realize he was physically unharmed. It took him weeks before he could speak about what had happened in any coherent way. Months before he could sleep without waking in terror. And years before he understood, at least to his own satisfaction, why he had been sent there and what he was supposed to do with what he had seen. The question, of course, is what to make of any of this. Neurologists who study near-death experiences point to well-documented physiological states: hypoxia, REM intrusion, temporal lobe activity, that can produce experiences of extraordinary vividness and emotional intensity. The sensation of heat, of presence, of movement, of voices, all of these have documented correlates in altered brain states. Dr. Pim van Lommel, the Dutch cardiologist who conducted one of the most rigorous NDE studies ever published, in The Lancet in 2001, found that a consistent subset of patients reported experiences that could not be explained by brain oxygen levels alone. Van Lommel stopped short of claiming proof of an afterlife, but he argued that the phenomenon deserved far more serious scientific attention than it had received. Theologians are divided along predictable lines. Some point to scriptural descriptions of hell, Gehenna, the lake of fire, the outer darkness, and note that Bill Wise's account tracks certain biblical imagery with striking precision. Others argue that visions of hell are culturally conditioned, that what we see in extremis is shaped by what we already believe, not by what is objectively there. Skeptics have challenged Bill Wiese directly, on his timeline, on the absence of medical records from that night, on the commercial success of his book. He has responded to each challenge publicly, and has not materially altered his account in over 20 years of telling it. What we are left with is this: a man who says he went somewhere, came back, and has spent the rest of his life unable to stop talking about it. Bill Wiese gave up his real estate career. He has spent the years since traveling the world telling anyone who will listen what he says he saw in those 23 minutes. He does not describe himself as special. He says repeatedly that he believes he was sent there not as a punishment, but as a warning, and that the warning was meant to be passed on. Whether you believe him or not, and that is entirely your call to make, what is harder to dismiss is the quality of a life rearranged completely around a single event. People do not typically reorganize their entire existence around a nightmare. Something happened to Bill Wiese on November 23, 1998, at 3 o'clock in the morning. He spent 23 minutes somewhere, and whatever that place was, he has never once, in over 2 decades, expressed any desire to go back.